There are many methods to help us to create middleware components. In this video, let's learn to use the app.use method to create middleware components. With the app.use method, we can create a regular middleware component or a terminal middleware component. Let's jump into Visual Studio and start creating a web application with middleware pipeline. Let's launch Visual Studio and let's scroll down over here to create a new project. Again, I'm going to just search ASP.NET Core. And after that, I'm going to scroll down until I see ASP.NET Core empty. And let's use this project template. Click on Next button. And here, I'm going to say Learn Middleware for the project. I'm again going to call it Web App and click on the Next button. Framework, we'll continue to use .NET 9. Preview version for you, it could be just .NET 9 if after November, .NET 9 is already released. I'm using release candidate 1 and I'm going to uncheck HTTPS. We're going to add HTTPS later. Now we can click on the Create button and let's close this tab. We don't need it. And let's go to Solution Explorer over here. Unfortunately, we created F#. We're supposed to use C#. So we have to do it again. Close Solution, try to create it again. And we search ASP.NET Core, scroll down to here. Now it says C#, but I don't know why we use F# at the end. So learn pipeline, and I'm going to call it web app again. Click on next and check this. Now we have program.cs. Okay, let's go to program.cs, and we're familiar with this 4 lines of code. So in order to create a middleware, we're going to use line number 4. Okay, and we're going to say app.use. We have used app.run before. App.run, we are going to talk about app.run later. For this video, we're going to use app.use. This app.use also takes a delegate, but as you can see, it takes a delegate with 2 different parameters. The first one is the context object, the HTTP context. And the next one is actually the delegate that can help us to trigger the next middleware. So it goes like this. If we hover the mouse over the first one, you can see the type of the first one is HTTP context. And we hover the mouse over the next parameter, it's of the type request delegate. Now, of course, this way of creating the Lambda expression, we omitted the type. If you want to add it, add the type, you can add it right here, just like this. So this app.use method is helping us to create our first middleware. So inside this app.use, we're creating our logic inside the first middleware. And for demonstration purpose, I'm going to just say context.response.write. So you're familiar with this. And we are going to say middleware 1. So middleware number 1. And this is before, right? And then again, this is write async, right? So in order to call it with the await keyword so that we can continue after the write async properly, we have to use the async keyword. And then we can use await. So this way, the code after this is a continuation of the async method here. Otherwise, without the await keyword, this is going to run asynchronously. So which means that potentially the next line could run first. So we don't want that to happen. We want this write async to happen before the next middleware is triggered. So now we can trigger the next middleware by just calling the next delegate. And next delegate requires 1 parameter, which is the context. Here you see how we forward the context object to the next middleware component. So very easy, we just forward this. And the next method is actually a async method. So therefore, we're going to use await. And now, once we finish this, What's the wait keyword? The rest is again a continuation of this async method. So in order to do something here, we're going to simply write out some text again. So this is after calling. So you see that this is a middleware. The use is helping us to create this middleware. So this middleware is essentially a function that triggers the next middleware's function. Therefore, before we trigger the function, we can do some processing. And after we trigger that function, we can do some finalizing processing too, right? So of course, before we trigger the next middleware, our processing is purely based on the context object that is passed into this middleware. After we trigger this next middleware, our processing can be based on the context object again, but this context object is most likely already modified by the rest of the middleware already. Okay, so we have some more information in the context object. Of course, I'm not showing in this code. I'm simply just writing out the async. But it's very likely that our next middleware or the next one or the next one, right? Basically, the rest of the middleware component could have already modified the context object. And therefore, our logic after triggering the middleware here can be based on those modifications in the context object. Okay, so this is our first middleware. So let's have some comments here. I'm going to say this is middleware number 1. And then we can have, let's add another 2 middleware components here. So this is middleware number 2. And this is before calling middleware number 2. And this is after calling middleware number 2. And we're going to paste this again. I'm going to create the third one. So middleware number 3, and this is before calling middleware number 3, and this is after calling number 3. Okay, so let's run our application in debug mode and let's see how this works. Well, before we run this, I have to emphasize again, this code, right? Code over here, let me minimize this. These lines of code are not actually run in sequence. This is run first, this is run secondly, but these codes represents the code for creating middlewares. And these codes, well, I have to say that the lambda expression inside will not run, will not be executed until requests are received. So it's going to run, but the lambda expression will only be executed when request is received. Right here, we just basically run the Kestrel server as well as the web application and listen for the request to come in. As soon as request